Question number 11. In the poem, the Aeolian harp is for the speaker all of the following except what? Remember again to be careful on except questions. Remember that you're looking for what does not apply. So we're looking for what the harp does not represent for the speaker. Our choices are A, a source of pleasure, a gentle reproof, a suggestive symbol, a source of inspiration, and an enchanting voice. A source of pleasure. Well, we know the harp is a source of pleasure for the speaker. Among other things, he speaks of its sound as sweet. C, a suggestive symbol. We know that it's a suggestive symbol as he compares it to a coy maid half yielding to her lover. D, a source of inspiration. Yes, it serves as a source of inspiration to the speaker. It inspires him to write this poem, for one thing, and it inspires him to think elevated thoughts about God and nature. E, an enchanting voice. And it is an enchanting voice to him. He compares it to the voice of twilight elfins. B, a gentle reproof. We're going to go back to B and look at this last because everything else is clearly here. We can see that the Aeolian harp is clearly all of the other elements for the speaker. So this answer choice might throw you off a little if you know that upbraiding means to find fault with or scolding. It seems that the Aeolian harp could also be considered a gentle reproof if upbraiding means finding fault. But the upbraiding is not directed at the speaker. The coy maiden, or the lute, is pouring such sweet upbraiding or beautiful music at her lover, the breeze, that the breeze is tempted to repeat the caressing in order to get more beautiful music. So the harp is not a source of sweet upbraiding or gentle reproof for the speaker, it's for the breeze. So B, gentle reproof, is the correct response. Question number 12. Lines 44 through 48 can best be described as a what? So we'll read those lines. And what if all of animated nature be but organic harps diversely framed that tremble into thought as o'er them sweeps plastic and vast one intellectual breeze, at once the soul of each and God of all? And let's look at the answers. A simile for the relationship between the speaker and Sarah. Well, we can see immediately that there is no simile here. There's no comparison using the words like or as, so cross out A. B, counter-argument to establish the speaker's credibility. The poem isn't posing an argument, and this isn't a counter-argument, nor does it in any way establish the speaker's credibility, so no. C, digression from the main subject of the poem. The speaker isn't digressing from the subject of the poem, he is still talking about the harp, so cross out C. D, change from description to narration. No, this isn't a change from description to narration. E, metaphorical application of the image of the lute. So in these lines, nature is represented as a harp or harps, and the intellect is represented as the breeze. The speaker is using metaphor to introduce the idea that intellect enriches nature. So yes, this is a metaphorical application of the image of the lute, and the correct answer is E. Question number 13. In the last section of the poem, the speaker implies that to try to fathom the incomprehensible, line 59, is what? Of course, you'll need to know what incomprehensible means, but you can probably puzzle it out if you don't know it. You know that to comprehend is to understand, and that this prefix, in, is a prefix that negates the word. Incomprehensible, then, is something that cannot be understood. So if we look at this last section of the poem, we can see that in this passage he talks about the incomprehensible, and he says, I speak of him, the incomprehensible. So we need to know who this him is. Traditionally, God is portrayed as male, and if we look at the diction used here, we can conclude that it is indeed God to whom he is referring. The poet speaks of having awe for this being, which means fearful amazement, and he talks of praising him, as well as using words like faith, saving mercies, and sinful. And he even mentions God because the woman reproves him for his thoughts, the shapings of the unregenerate mind. So, continuing on with his train of thinking, he calls philosophy vain or empty and useless and possibly arrogant. Trying to discern the incomprehensible, which is God, would be a branch of philosophy, which is vain. He uses the metaphor babbling stream to refer to philosophy. Can mean forever, and babbling is the noise a brook or stream makes, which might sound pretty, but it isn't really saying anything. So philosophy babbles on, sounding good, but being ultimately meaningless in the face of the incomprehensible God. So the speaker is implying that it would be useless and arrogant to think that one could understand God. So now that we've tackled what he's saying, let's go back to the question and look at our choices. The speaker is implying that to try to fathom the incomprehensible is what? A, difficult except during privileged moments. The poet doesn't talk about it being difficult to fathom the incomprehensible. Actually, if you think of the meaning of the word, he is really saying it's impossible, so this choice is out. B, the true function of music and poetry. No, he doesn't mention that, and besides, this is a poem itself, and it's not functioning as a means to fathom the incomprehensible, which is impossible, so that can't be right. Cross out B. C, possible only through metaphor. It may be that it's possible to fathom the incomprehensible through metaphor only, but he doesn't say that here, so no. D, every thinking person's duty. He certainly doesn't say that trying to fathom the incomprehensible is every thinking person's duty. In fact, he says that he wouldn't be guiltless for doing it, so he, who is obviously a thinking person, would be guilty if he tried to do it. A duty is something we should do, not something that we would be guilty for doing, so this choice is out too. E, an act of overweening pride. Overweening means excessive, and the speaker definitely is implying that imagining one could fathom or understand the incomprehensible God would be pride. He says that he would not be guiltless if he tried to speak of the incomprehensible as if he understood him. Instead, he should only praise God with awe and with faith that he inwardly feels. So the answer is E, an act of overweening pride. Question number 14. It can be inferred that Sarah's attitude toward the speaker's speculations is one of what? This is fairly straightforward. What is Sarah's attitude toward the speaker's speculations? He's rambling on with these thoughts and speculations about God, and then he says, "But thy more serious eye a mild reproof darts, O beloved woman. Nor such thoughts dim and unhallowed dost thou not reject, and biddest me walk humbly with my God." Reproof is a scolding or an expression of disapproval, and the speaker calls her disapproval a mild reproof, which is gentle. So the best answer is B, gentle disapproval. And just to deal with the other answers, Sarah isn't laughing. We get no indication of amusement. Neither do we get the impression that she is filled with respectful awe for the speaker's thinking. While she might be fond, it doesn't say or imply that she's admiring, and she's certainly not openly hostile. And of course, the correct answer is B. Question number 15. The poem is an example of which of the following verse forms? All of the choices here are literary terms, and you need to know them to answer this question. First of all, we have A, ballad meter. It can't be this form because there are no rhyming lines, and ballad meter is written in a specific rhyming pattern. B, terza rima. Terza means three, rima means rhyme. Again, this poem doesn't rhyme, so it's not terza rima. C, the heroic couplet also needs to rhyme, so it's not that one. So this poem doesn't rhyme, and our two remaining choices are non-rhyming poetry forms. Let's look at D, free verse. Free verse doesn't rhyme, but it also doesn't have a regular meter or rhythm. If we read a couple of lines in this poem, we can hear the rhythm, which meets all motion and becomes its soul, a light in sound, a sound like power in light. There's definitely a rhythm here. E, blank verse, refers to poetry with no rhyme, but with iambic pentameter, which is a specific pattern of rhythm. This poem certainly has that. So the correct answer to this question is E, blank verse.